Welcome back to the deep dive. So, if you're listening, maybe you've heard this before. Things like, oh, you're too sensitive,
Mm.
or you're overthinking things, maybe why so dramatic, or just flat out, you're too much.
Yeah, that last one hits hard for a lot of people.
Right. Well, today we're diving deep into some really interesting research that takes that whole intense emotional experience, that sheer capacity for feeling, and it flips the script.
Totally reframes it.
Yeah, not as a flaw, definitely not a diagnosis, but actually as a potential strength, a
Yeah.
real inherent strength.
That's absolutely the goal here. Our mission today is really shifting that narrative.
Hmm.
We talk about emotional sensitivity or intensity, maybe emotional giftedness.
Yeah,
Sources got to use these terms back and forth.
interchangeably.
Right. And we want to show how it could actually be a path to uh, self-actualization, a sign of higher potential, not something broken that needs fixing.
Yeah. Okay, so this isn't some tiny group of people either. We're talking about the highly sensitive person, or HSP, or just the emotionally intense individual. What do the sources say about, like, how common this is, and why does it get so misunderstood?
Well, the estimates hover around, say, 15 to 20% of the population might share this trait. So quite significant.
Oh, okay.
And the misunderstanding, it often comes because the intensity shows up as this incredible depth, but also sometimes really rapid shifts.
Yeah.
You can go from feeling amazing total elation to deep despair, sometimes really quickly.
And I guess if people on the outside only see those swings, it just looks like instability.
Exactly. That's the key problem.
Yeah.
And that's why it often gets mislabeled. It can look like borderline personality disorder, BPD, or bipolar, maybe even ADHD,
Yeah.
because the processing is so fast and deep.
Mm.
But the core identity here, as the sources put it, it's like having a powerful machine. Think of an emotional sports car. High-powered engine, amazing capabilities.
But tricky to handle, maybe.
Precisely. If you don't know how to drive it, or if the road conditions are bad, it feels dangerous. But the car itself isn't the problem.
Okay, I like the sports car idea, but isn't a high-powered machine sometimes just dangerous? If we're talking symptoms that overlap with BPD or instability, how do we reassure people listening that this intensity is really a strength, not just, a bigger risk?
That's a really important question. The intensity itself is the capacity,
Hmm.
the potential danger. That comes from, well, a lack of training wheels or maybe driving in on the wrong kind of road, metaphorically
Oh,
speaking.
poor environment.
Yes, or just not having the skills yet. A Formula One car on a bumpy dirt road with an untrained driver. Risky.
Hmm.
But the car itself, that high-capacity system, is still built for peak performance.
Huh.
We're looking at the fundamental potential, which is powerful, not necessarily the current handling skills, which can be learned.
Okay, let's dig into that potential then, the architecture of this emotional sports car. It's clearly more than just, like, being bothered by loud noises. What are the main characteristics? The sources mention 5 key traits.
Yeah, we can synthesize it down to 5 core features that really define this experience. First, it's those profound, intense, and complex emotions. This is about depth, experiencing joy with incredible vividness, but also loss with a kind of soul-crushing despair.
Hmm.
It shows up as strong passion, really intense love, deep attachments, and then logically, a real difficulty when things end with separation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, there's deep empathy and high sensitivity. This is more than just feeling sorry for someone. It's like an innate, sometimes overwhelming ability to literally sense other people's energy, their mood, their pain.
You just walk into a room and know something's off.
Exactly. You feel the world suffering quite intensely sometimes. And this often leads to this deep desire for really meaningful, maybe spiritual or just authentic connections.
That intuitive radar thing, knowing when someone's not being straight, it sounds exhausting, but also, like, incredibly useful.
Which leads right into the third trait. Acute perception. It's like having a nonstop observation deck running in your head.
Noticing everything.
Yeah, subtle details others completely miss.
Hmm.
A tiny shift in someone's eyes, the rhythm of their voice, that little bit of tension in their posture. You often feel like you can see through the surface, assessing motives pretty quickly, sometimes with startling accuracy.
So it's not just feeling things intensely, it's like you processing the world on a faster, deeper level, too.
Precisely. And that ties into the fourth trait. A rich inner world. This mind is always on. It's running this constant high-def internal movie
Mm-hmm.
full of introspection, deep thinking, really vivid imagination, lots of metaphors, and what some researchers call intense intellectual excitability. You're probably someone who reads a lot, processes complex stuff quickly, maybe sees connections others don't.
Right. And the fifth one, you mentioned a paradox.
Yes, the fifth is this interesting pairing of creative potential and existential anxiety. These individuals often worry intensely about the big questions,
Mm.
meaning death, loneliness, fairness, grappling with what's called existential depression, sometimes from a really young age. But that anxiety, that deep questioning, it actually creates this internal urgency, a drive to move forward, to create, to find or make meaning, to contribute something.
Mm.
And this link between emotional intensity and giftedness, it's really crucial. And we're not just talking IQ scores here.
Right. And not just book smarts.
No, it could be potential in music, visual arts, logic, even relational or spiritual intelligence.
Hmm.
High potential across different domains.
And that sheer intensity is kind of a marker for that potential.
Yeah.
The sources use a specific term for this, right? Overexcitability, or OE.
That's the one. Overexcitability. It's a concept from Kazimierz Dobrowski, and it basically describes an innate physiological capacity to respond more intensely, more deeply, more broadly to stimuli than the average person.
Okay.
Let's touch on three key types of OE that really connect here. First, and maybe most central, is emotional OE. That's the extreme, complex emotional life we've been talking about. When feelings are that intense, they often show up physically too.
Mhm.
You might get stomach aches, blush easily, maybe even feel faint from the sheer force of an emotion.
Hmm.
It drives that need for intense attachments, deep connections.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, intellectual OE. This is that fierce drive for truth, that intense curiosity, the super fast assimilation of information. It's like having a mental processor running at warp speed.
Yeah.
And when that processor isn't getting enough input, enough challenge, the person complains of profound boredom. And it's not just, oh, I'm a bit bored. It's like an internal pressure cooker, real discomfort.
I know that feeling,
Yeah.
that actual physical sensation of boredom when things are too shallow or slow.
Exactly. And third is imaginational OE. This is the mind that creates incredibly vivid dreams, fantasies, complex inner worlds, dramatic scenarios.
Right.
The challenge here often is that their inner visual or conceptual world is so rich and complex, they actually struggle to put it into words effectively. Like trying to describe a whole intricate tapestry using only crayon drawings leads to frustration, maybe turning to art or music instead of just words.
Okay, this brings up something that seems counterintuitive. You'd think someone so sensitive to everything, emotions, sounds, details, would need, like a quiet cave, low stimulation, but you're saying that's actually bad.
It often is detrimental, yes. For the
Yeah.
highly intense person, the goal isn't necessarily low stimulation, it's optimal stimulation.
Okay.
Too little stimulation, being bored, feeling underutilized, disconnected, it can feel almost like a physical ache,
Yeah.
a void. It creates restlessness, anxiety, this deep negative feeling of emptiness that can actually be worse than dealing with manageable overstimulation.
Ah.
They generally need a certain level of challenge, emotional, intellectual, maybe physical, to stay balanced. That high-performance sports car needs the track, Otherwise, it just stalls out or feels
Yeah.
wrong.
Right. So this intensity, it's a source of power, but it causes a lot of friction, a lot of pain, because the world often isn't set up for it. It's built for maybe the average emotional speed, not this kind of acceleration. Let's talk about those external forces pushing back.
Absolutely. The external world often struggles with anything that stands out, anything exceptional, and this creates these powerful social dynamics that pressure you, often subtly, sometimes not so subtly, to conform, to hide that intensity.
Okay, what are some ways this happens? The sources mention specific patterns.
Yes, we see a few recurring phenomena. First, there's something called tall poppy syndrome. You see this in various cultures. Basically, individuals who are outstanding or successful get cut down, attacked, or resented because they stand out.
Just for being different or achieving more.
Exactly. The intense person, just by being authentically themselves, can attract this kind of negative attention. Second, there's the crab in the bucket mentality. Picture crabs in a bucket. If one starts to climb out, the others will pull it back down.
Oh.
People sometimes, often subconsciously, try to undermine someone else's success or growth because it makes them feel bad about their own situation, maybe out of shame or a sense of scarcity.
Oh,
If you start reaching for your potential, others might try to pull you back.
that's rough.
And third, you have concepts like the law of Jante, which originated in Scandinavia, but you see echoes elsewhere. These are like informal, deeply embedded social rules against exceptionalism. Things like, don't think you're special, don't think you're better than us, don't think you can teach us anything.
Ooh.
These are really insidious because they make the intense person feel like it's somehow morally wrong to just be who they are, to use their gifts.
It sounds like the moment you reveal your true, intense self, society basically says, nope, dial it back, cut yourself down to size.
And unfortunately, that pressure often starts very early,
Uh,
in the most crucial place, the family. The sources talk about these wounds being invisible sometimes, because it's not always obvious abuse or neglect.
Subtle stuff.
Yeah, subtle but corrosive. Maybe parents who just lack the emotional depth or capacity to understand and support a highly sensitive child. Or parentification, where the child basically has to become the emotional caregiver for the parents.
Taking on adult responsibilities way too young.
Right. And perhaps one of the most damaging patterns is being made the scapegoat. The family unconsciously projects all its anxiety and dysfunction onto the most sensitive member, the one who feels things deeply, who might actually see the hidden truths and labels them as the problem.
God, if you're constantly told you're the problem, that shame must just become part of your core identity.
And that leads directly into the major internal challenges. This chronic external invalidation breeds deep, deep shame and withdrawal. You internalize the message that you are fundamentally wrong or too much. This shame can play out in different ways, maybe imposter syndrome, feeling like a total fraud even when you are successful, or it leads to what one source calls freezing the gift. You actively hide or suppress your intense nature, your power, kind of like Elsa in Frozen, just trying to feel safe, accepted, loved.
Okay, let's circle back to the BPD paradox for a second, because this seems like a really critical point of confusion. If someone highly sensitive hasn't learned how to manage those big emotions, their behavior, the storminess, the rapid shifts could look like borderline personality disorder.
It absolutely can on the surface.
So if the outward behavior looks similar, how does someone listening know if they're dealing with, say, a need for better skills versus a clinical disorder like BPD?
That is such a vital distinction. BPD typically involves pervasive issues in relationships, often stemming from a really unstable sense of self, deep fears of abandonment, and impulsivity. The highly intense person, though, even when struggling, often has an excess of empathy and relational depth. They might be that mind reader type, super attuned to nonverbal cues.
Okay.
Their emotional storms often come not from a core deficit in self or reality testing, but from being overwhelmed by too much accurate, complex, often painful input without the tools to contain it. It's fundamentally a skill deficit in emotional regulation, not necessarily an inherent pathology of personality structure.
So if you teach the regulation skills,
The storms often calm significantly, but the underlying intensity, the depth, the sensitivity that remains, it's about learning to manage the intensity, not pathologizing the intensity itself. So the path forward, the framework for growth, it really involves shifting, moving away from those defensive postures, hiding, avoiding, isolating, towards more openness, towards expansion, towards embracing the world, embracing the self.
less fighting the engine, more learning how to tune it and drive it.
Exactly. We need to learn how to handle that sports car.
So how do we do that? How do we rebuild or maybe to learn to operate this high-performance machine so it doesn't keep crashing or burning out?
Well, a really powerful framework for understanding this kind of high-level growth comes again from Dabrowski. It's called positive disintegration.
Positive disintegration. Sounds intense.
It is intense. He argued that the intense internal conflict that highly sensitive and gifted people often experience, that constant, sometimes agonizing split between who you feel you are right now, with all your perceived flaws, and who you feel you could or should be, your higher ideals. The conflict isn't a sign of being broken.
Okay, so the pain isn't proof you're failing. It's proof you're actually developing.
Precisely. That internal struggle, that dissonance, is actually a necessary catalyst for development. Dabrowski saw emotional intensity as the literal fuel needed for this kind of growth. It forces you to break down old ways of being, old structures that aren't authentic, and build new ones aligned with higher values: truth, authenticity, justice.
Wow.
The sensitivity basically forces a kind of moral or existential reckoning that pushes you toward greater maturity if you navigate it constructively.
Okay, so how do we navigate it? What does cultivating resilience look like in practice?
The goal ultimately is to build this core sense of self, this inner stability that isn't totally dependent on or destroyed by your fluctuating powerful emotions. And the sources point to a few key steps. First, grieving what could have been. This means really acknowledging and mourning the loss of maybe a normal childhood, or the idealized reality that your intensity perhaps made impossible. It's often a fuzzy loss, hard to pin down, but grieving it helps break free from old reactive patterns tied to that past.
Letting go of that imagined easier life.
Yes. Second, building an internal safe base. As kids, we look outside for safety. As adults with this trait, we have to learn to provide that safety internally. That means developing real self-soothing skills and building radical self-trust, believing you have the inner resources to handle whatever comes up, even chaos.
Becoming your own anchor.
Exactly. And third, crucially, you have to fully embrace your emotions. Stop seeing them as the enemy, as threats to be squashed or avoided. They are allies. They're vital information systems.
Like a dashboard.
A very advanced dashboard. Anger is signaling a boundary needs attention. Anxiety is signaling preparation might be needed. Your intensity is your high-definition guidance system.
Yeah.
You just need to learn to read the signals without letting them hijack the car.
This whole reframing is really powerful. We started with hearing "you're too much," and we're ending with this idea that your deep capacity to feel isn't something to get rid of, but something to actually master. The challenge isn't about becoming less sensitive, but about learning how to drive that high-powered emotional sports car effectively, safely, maybe even joyfully.
Beautifully put. And if we zoom out to the biggest picture, achieving that highest level of growth, that self-actualization we talked about, it might require what Dabrowski called creative disadjustment or positive maladjustment.
Creative disadjustment.
Meaning, instead of constantly trying to squeeze yourself into a socially constructed box of normal, which often requires hiding your brightest, most intense parts, the real goal is to fully align with your unique, intense nature, your own higher values, maybe truth, creativity, compassion, authenticity.
Even if that makes you different.
Especially if it makes you different. That alignment might, and often will, put you out of sync with the mainstream. But Dabrowski would argue that this positive maladjustment, being true to your authentic, intense self, is precisely where your unique contribution to the world actually begins.
That's a powerful thought to end on.
That's the deeper journey, the one we hope you feel invited to explore.